Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry. I forget there's a little delay there. All right. Our stenographer today is Lynn Alonzo. We're going to be, we'll be reporting the hearing verbatim. So to ensure that we have an accurate record, we ask everybody to speak at one time. Please speak clearly, avoid speaking over one another. When needed, Ms. Alonzo or any panel member will interject to ensure that we get a proper transcript. After the hearing, Ms. Alonzo will produce an official transcript, official hearing transcript, which will be available on our website, the Office of Tax Appeals website. Just a reminder, OTA is not a court. We are an independent appeals body staffed by subject matter experts. While we are not a court, we do endeavor to follow certain guidelines to ensure we establish a proper record on which the decision can be based and to conduct an orderly hearing. Each party will have an opportunity to be heard, so please wait for your turn to present your side. Also, I or my co-panelists may interrupt in order to ensure we have a productive hearing, that everyone gets an opportunity to be heard, keep us on track with the time allotments that we have. So if we could endeavor to have a clean presentation today, that'd be great. So before we go on the record, do anybody have any questions?
No, department's no question. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any questions? Excellent. All right. Everyone ready? All right, we're going to go on the record now. This is the appeal of Acre Garden Supply, doing business as Green Acre Hydroponics. OTA case number is 231214880. The date is December 11th. Time is approximately 9:35 a.m. We are located in the Cerritos office of the Office of Tax Appeals in California. I am, as I said, I'm Judge Turner. I'm joined by my panelists, Judge Stanley and Judge Kim. We are equal participants in this process. Each of us may have hearings. I'm sort of the conductor today for the hearing, but otherwise my panelists and I are co-participants. After the hearing, we will deliberate on it and we will render our decision within 100 days. We may each individually ask questions, and if you have any questions of us, we'll go forward. If I could take this time real quick for the parties to introduce themselves. You could introduce yourself for the record.
Yeah, Manny Almeida. I'm representing Acre Garden.
Excellent.
Ravinder Sharma, hearing representative, CDTFA. Thank you.
Jason Parker, Chief of Headquarters Operations Bureau with CDTFA.
Welcome.
Chad Backus with the CDTFA's Legal Division.
Welcome. Okay, so we had a pre-hearings conference. We established what the issues were. I'll state them for the record, whether further adjustments to the measure of appellant's unreported taxable sales are warranted as related to certain sales for resales, and then certain sales, whether they were exempt pursuant to Regulation 1588, and then whether or not the imposition of a negligence penalty was warranted. Everybody agree with that statement of the issues?
That is correct. Thank you.
Correct.
Excellent. Okay. Briefed exhibits. At pre-hearings conference, we talked about the taxpayer is going to rely on exhibits that were presented by the department. Numbers, we're going to label them A through E. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah,
Excellent. Fine. Okay. So those will be our exhibits for the day, labeled A through E. We're not going to have any witnesses today. I think that's pretty. Yeah. Any other questions before we get going?
No questions.
Excellent.
Thank you.
None here.
All right. Well, we're going to start with you. We allotted our time was 45 minutes. You had requested initially. We may have questions after that. as the panel, and then we'll proceed with the department. The department has, I think, 30 minutes we talked about, right? And then we'll proceed with maybe questions then, and then you'll have an opportunity for some closing remarks. We may do questions before or after as well. So just try to get as much information as we can, okay?
Right.
All right, so let's start with you.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much, appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity to present our case here. This audit was one of those that was done remotely during the COVID times where, auditors asked for records. We gave the records electronically. They went about doing their work and then ultimately presenting their findings. One of the issues with this audit was, number one, the industry and the type of products that are being sold here, and whether, a bulk sale of $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 would constitute a sale for resale. And the auditor never made a trip to our office, never made a trip to the taxpayer's place of business, and made a lot of decisions on their own. Ultimately, supposedly they were calling customers and trying to determine, hey, these customers have seller's permits. Do they have a resale certificate on file? Did you ever issue a resale certificate to the retail or the wholesaler, in this particular case, Acre Garden? And so a lot of these things were done without our participation and our knowledge, which, again, from day one when the COVID pandemic hit and a lot of these audits were being done remotely and auditors were not in our office getting feedback from us and asking questions, we had this situation where they wound up disallowing a significant amount of sales for resale. And again, going back to Regulation 1668, yeah, you can have a resale certificate. You should have a resale certificate on file. But if you're making sales and your facility clearly is not the type of facility that you would have for walk-in traffic, retailer, for example, that should be considered. And none of that was ever considered. In fact, we gave a list of about 10 or 12 customers to the auditor, to the supervisor, to the principal auditor in the Glendale office, and at no point in time did they make any adjustments. There was a lot of money on the table, a lot of sales, a lot of transactions, but a lot of the customers were the same over and over again. And there was no emphasis put on that whatsoever. Again, maybe some of these customers may not have been compliant. Maybe they didn't have a sales tax permit, seller's permit. But at the end of the day, based on my experience, and I've been doing this for a long, long time, a resale is a resale. And whether somebody has a document that demonstrates that, supports it, yeah, that's one item. But at the end of the day, if you've got customers that maybe aren't complying with the sales tax laws, then my recollection and the way that we've always handled it, even when I was an auditor, we would try to get that customer registered, and we would make sure that if in fact it was clearly a sale for resale just because of the volume and the type of product, that it would be a sale for resale. And if the customer needed to be registered, then they should be registered. And that was not, to the best of my knowledge, that was not something that was done. And again, we've got so much correspondence going back and forth from the time that the audit was completed and the results were given to us, or the findings, the preliminary findings. There was really no other adjustment that was ever made, simply because the auditor, supervisor, and principal auditor in that office felt that our client was not compliant. And yeah, to a certain extent, they weren't compliant. But at the end of the day, like I said, a sale for resale, in fact, is a sale for resale. And like I said, we've provided numerous names of customers, volumes, transactions, left and right, where you can actually see that not an individual is going to buy these products. In addition to that, there are certain products that were considered under, I believe, Regulation 1583, where you're basically involving the hydroponics industry, where some of these products clearly were not consumables, and there was not enough emphasis put on that, and if there was question, it was disallowed as a taxable transaction. So, that's ultimately the decision or the conclusion that they came to, and I just feel that the department didn't do its due diligence. They wanted to get this thing fast-tracked. They wanted to just disallow based on the fact that the resale certificates were not available, and even when we provided resale certificates subsequent to the audit, they really didn't accept any of them. And they said, well, it's after the fact. And I understand, XYZ letters, but at the end of the day, XYZ letters, which are typically, used to support transactions thereafter, the auditor doesn't have to, they don't have to accept it, because maybe that particular business didn't have a permit at the time of the transaction. But, that's, at the end of the day, that's a taxable transaction on their end, not our end. And I just think the due diligence and the things that needed to be done to complete this audit in a reasonable methodology, it was not done. And ultimately, that's our position. Obviously, the negligence penalty, yeah, there's a lot of money on the table, and I know the department seems to penalize taxpayers on a first audit back in the day. BOE days, they didn't necessarily penalize a taxpayer if it was their first audit, just simply on the basis that, we're dealing with an industry, in this particular case, an industry that's relatively, I guess, new as far as the growth potential, and there was a penalty given just to add more fuel to or more salt to the wound. And, it's an unfortunate situation, but it's the taxpayer's first audit. They just were not familiar with the resale process. The guy that basically we work with, it was like a learning experience for him on a day-to-day. And, he was just trying to make the money and, trying to take advantage of the fact that the business was growing. But, to me, it's just one of those things that it's really easy to just finish the audit, complete it, and not have to worry about, going to the location of the business and seeing the type of location and the type of facility that they have, which is basically a facility that sells in bulk. It's not, you just walk in and buy one particular item. That's not this particular business.
Is that the extent of your testimony?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions? Any questions? Okay. I'm going to come back. I have some questions, but
Okay.
I'm going to come back after
Okay.
the departments made their presentation, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Appellant operated a gardening and hydroponic supply store in Woodland Hills, California during the period June 2012 through August 2022. The department performed an audit examination for the period of July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2021. Appellant reported taxable sales of approximately $2.6 million and claimed no deductions for the audit period. Exhibit A, page 10. Records available for the audit. Appellant provided federal income tax returns for years 2018 to 2020. Recorded sales summary, customer detailed reports, and profit and loss statements for the audit period. The department compared gross receipts per federal income tax return and reported total sales per sales and use tax returns and noted difference of around $23 million for 2018 to 2020. Exhibit A, page 745. During the audit process, appellant informed the department that it did not include non-taxable sales and exempt sales in its reporting to the department. To verify the accuracy of reported amounts, non-taxable sales, and exempt sales, the department and appellant agreed to a block test method. After discussion with appellant's representative, it was agreed to examine sales invoices and supporting documents for first quarter 2021. The department reviewed sales invoices, customer details reports, available resale cards, and other best available information, including the department's internal system to determine taxable sales ratio of 67% for first quarter 2021. Exhibit A, pages 14 to 737. The department used appellants provided sales summary reports and determined audited total sales of $29.6 million for the audit period. Exhibit A, page 743. The department applied the taxable sales ratio of 67% to the audited total sales of $29.6 million and determined audited taxable sales of a little more than $19.8 million for the audit period. Exhibit A, page 13. Appellant reported taxable sales of approximately $2.6 million, resulting in unreported taxable sales of a little more than $17.2 million for the audit period. Exhibit A, page 12. When the department is not satisfied with the amount of tax reported by the taxpayer, the department may determine the amount required to be paid based on any information which is in its possession or may come into its possession. In the case of an appeal, the department has a minimal initial burden of showing that its determination was reasonable and rational. Once the department has met its initial burden, the burden of proof shifts to the taxpayer to establish that a result differing from the department's determination is warranted. Unsupported assertions are not sufficient to satisfy a taxpayer's burden of proof. The department used appellant's books and records and other best available information to determine the audit liability. Doing so produced a reasonable and rational determination. Appellant disagrees with the findings of the first quarter 2021 block test. Appellant contends that some of the unreported taxable sales were non-taxable sales for resale under Regulation 1668 and provided 11 documents which included 9 resale certificates and 2 screenshots of the seller's permit. Exhibit E, pages 864 to 874. The department examined each document and observed the following. For Flora Flex Inc., the department noted that there were no sales during the test period. Exhibit E, page 866. For B Grow Hydroponics, the department verified the resale certificate was valid and allowed all sales during the test period. Exhibit E, page 873. For the remaining 9 customers in question, Westside Caregivers Club, D Inc., Kush Alley Inc., Malibu Community Collective Inc., Original Balboa Caregivers, and SFBF Inc. The department noted that 6 of them are cannabis dispensaries that grow and sell cannabis and related products. However, the resale certificates provided for these customers state that they are in the business of selling gardening equipment, nursery and grow supplies, pest control, and or lighting, etc. Exhibit E, page 865, 867 to 870, and page 874. Therefore, for the 6 cannabis dispensaries, the department determined that majority of the sales were not for resale. In all instances where customers purchase fertilizer for products sold in the regular course of business, the department gave the benefit of the doubt and allowed those sales as exempt under Regulation 1588. The remaining 3 customers are All Valley Pond, Superior Herbal Health, and Venus Beach Care Center. Exhibit E, page 864, 871, and 872. For All Valley Pond, the department noted that it claimed pawn interest deductions on its sales and use tax returns, and further research showed that it was a pawn shop, was not in the business of selling gardening equipment as alleged on the resale certificate. Exhibit E, page 864. Therefore, the department determined that the sales were not for resale. For Superior Herbal Health and Venus Beach Care Center, the department noted that there was no resale certificate provided. Exhibit E, page 871 and 872. And although appellant provided screenshots of the seller's permit for these businesses, it has not identified which transactions in the test period are at issue and has not provided evidence to show that the sales were resales in fact. In addition, for those businesses that provided resale certificates, the department attempted to validate the submitted documents but was not successful. In some instances, the department never received a reply, and in others, no one at the business could confirm that they issued the resale certificate. Based on the foregoing, the department determined that no further adjustments warranted to the audit findings. In regards to appellant's contention that large quantities of sales, such as $30,000 or more in sales amount, should be accepted as sales for resale without valid resale certificates. The department submits that when it is making a determination as to whether a sale is a resale in fact, it considers many different criteria, one of which is the dollar amount, though that is rarely the only criteria considered. Here, creating a $30,000 threshold is not appropriate, as there may be reasons other than resale for a business to purchase over $30,000 of appellant's product. Examples include cannabis dispensaries that purchase products for the cultivation portion or their business, and landscape businesses that purchase products to fulfill their landscape service contracts. Appellant contends that some of the unreported taxable sales were exempt under Regulation 1588 and 1668 and provided a worksheet with a list of claimed exempt transactions. Exhibit A, pages 747 to 775. The department reviewed the worksheet and claimed exempt transactions to determine an additional adjustment of $975 for first quarter 2021. However, the additional adjustment of $975 was immaterial and would not change the calculated error rate of 67% to determine the unreported taxable sales of a little more than $17.2 million. Further, on June 5, 2024, appellant submitted a letter dated June 26, 2023, and 3 Excel worksheets named additional per 1588, additional resales, and resale in fact to the Office of Tax Appeals. The department reviewed the submission and noted that the letter and the worksheets were duplicate of what was previously submitted by appellant to the department during the appeals process. The department had already reviewed those worksheets and determined that no adjustments were warranted. In fact, each line item listed in the 3 worksheets is included in the Schedule 12A 1A, audited taxable sales ratio for first quarter 21 sales data analysis, along with the detailed comments in column J as to why the department disallowed the claimed exempt sales. Exhibit A, pages 14 to 737. Based on the foregoing, the department has fully explained the basis for the deficiency, and appellant has not met its burden of proof that determination is overstated. The department assessed 10% negligence penalty for the audit period. Unreported taxable measure is 657% of the reported taxable sales, which is due to negligence in maintaining necessary books and records as required and mandated by Revenue Taxation Code 7053, 7054, and Regulation 1698. The understatement cannot be attributed to a bona fide and reasonable belief that the bookkeeping and reporting practices were sufficiently compliant with the requirement of sales and use tax law. Therefore, appellant was negligent and the penalty should be upheld. Based on the evidence presented, the department requests that appellant's appeal be denied. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any question you may have. Thank you.
Sorry. The 11 resale certificates that we're disputing, were those part of the sample that was used for projecting the amount that was non-tax or a sale for resale? Were they part of the pool? I wasn't clear on the record from that.
Yeah, they were, but what we were trying to do at that point, we were trying to get the total for each and every one of those customers. and try to have those removed from the audit.
Understood.
Yeah.
But there were the resale certificates in question were part of
Yeah,
what
the same.
became the
The first quarter 21.
understatement.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so
they
it was
were-
part of the first quarter 21 sample.
Okay. Any comment on that?
Yeah, because the department selected first quarter 21 test period. When we determined the taxable amount, in response to that, several months later, appellant submitted those 11 documents, out of which 9 were resale certificate and 2 were screenshots. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Follow-up question then. Part of the, if I understand the department's argument, part of the rejection of those resale certificates was with respect to the stated nature of the business was different than either an actual investigation determined what that retail business was in. Was that the basis of the rejection of the resale certificate? Was the resale certificate said in the business of garden, of selling garden supplies or something, and the actual examination or investigation of the business found that they were in a different line of business than that? Was that the basis of the department's rejection?
Basically, department questions the validity of these resale certificates. During the audit process, appellant informed the department that there was no resale certificates on file. Several months later, they produced these 9 resale certificates and 2 screenshots of seller permits. Department questioned that, and then to verify the validity of these resale certificates, the department contacted these signatories. In some cases, they never responded back. In other cases, they said, we don't remember if you ever signed the resale card, and they don't remember that if they ever issued a resale certificate. For the department to accept those resale certificates are valid, we have to basically make sure those are authentic certificates, even though those are dated in the past, but we could not verify that those were valid resale certificates. That's the reason we questioned the validity of those resale certificates.
Got it. So it had to do less with the fact that the statement on the resale certificate was inconsistent with what the department had determined was the taxpayer's line of business, or was a specific attempt to verify those with the taxpayer?
That was one of the criteria.
Okay.
The business, they were not in the same businesses which was listed on the resale certificate. That was one of the criteria. The other was basically to verify. Department used their internal system to see if they have a permit or what kind of business they are engaged in or what kind of reporting they have. So based on that, overall, after considering all the facts available to the department, all the other information, including internal system, department decided to reject those resale certificates. In spite of that, some of the transactions were still allowed under 1588 to give the benefit of doubt to appellant.
So was it, and this, was it the department's discovery that each of the holders of those resale certificates, alleged resale certificates, did they hold a seller's permit?
Yes, that's correct. In some cases they did. In some cases there were closed permit or permit was closed during that period, but still the department gave the benefit of doubt. If we have excluded those which were closed permit, then the error rate will go from 67 to 83%. But we did allow them,
Understood.
just to give the benefit of doubt, because once we see they had a permit, whether they were open or closed during that period for the test period, we allowed them.
Well, I disagree. I mean, obviously, the adjustment of $979, that in itself dictates. But a lot of the transactions, yeah, the decision was made by the auditor and the department, basically, that if whatever was on the sales tax permit as a description of the type of business, and they didn't feel comfortable with the type of products they were buying from my client, ultimately, they were disallowing it just based on the fact that that business was not in that business. But at the end of the day, like I said, the volume of purchases that were involved, and, you know, there's a bunch of pages and there's a lot of transactions. The mere fact that you would make a decision based on not having somebody give you a legitimate answer, and of course, we all know, and this has been known for many, many years, anytime an auditor calls, and that's why a lot of times we want to be involved. But anytime an auditor calls a customer, the first thing that comes to mind is fear. And fear meaning, I don't know who you are, and I don't know what I'm answering, so I'm not going to answer the question for various reasons. And I've always felt that, number one, not only are you violating the confidentiality of the audit of the taxpayer, but you're also putting a burden on the customer to make the decision as to whether something is for resale or not, which ultimately, that's not necessarily what Regulation 1668 intends. But that's part of the issue, and again, the mere fact that we gave them 11 separate customers and they made an adjustment of $979, clearly they were not in a position or did not want to proceed with doing additional due diligence, which again, like I said, under Regulation 1588, there are certain products that are exempt. Others, it's just a sale for resale just based on volume. And if you look at the volume, I mean, and you've got some common sense, you're going to look at it and you're going to say, okay, well, so-and-so is definitely not buying this product for their own use. And I'm not saying that that was the case in every instance, because again, we believe that there's some discrepancies and there's some shortcomings when it comes to sales for resale. But a whole heck of a lot of them should have been accepted by the department, and they really were not in any. And again, all you got to do is show that you have an intent to make some adjustments if you're providing additional documentation, because not all of it, as I mentioned, was available at the beginning of the audit simply because the taxpayer didn't really know what they were doing.
So I want to follow up then on a question I had about the nature. One of the arguments you made in the briefing was that you should be, we should recognize sale for resale based upon the nature, scope, and character of the sales. Can you help me understand the nature, what that nature, scope, and character of those sales were? We're talking a lot about garden supplies. Mm-hmm. The briefing talks a lot about garden supplies, but that's a very broad category of stuff. Mm-hmm. You give me a sense for what type of products we're talking about, and at least in this grouping of larger than $30,000 in sales, what's the nature of the customer, and why is it that based on those facts alone, it would suggest that a sale for resale happened, notwithstanding, as opposed to a sale for consumption, essentially?
Well, in the 30,000, I think we were trying to be conservative, because it could have been anything. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it could have been anything 5,000 to 10,000. But we wanted to be conservative, and obviously get a better perspective on what the department was going for. But at the end of the day, it's stuff that you're going to find at OSH. There's obviously equipment that is used in the growing industry, and again, it's not necessarily cannabis. It could be just growing of plants. It could be the growing industry. So it wasn't necessarily that. And then, obviously there's a whole slew of supplements and things like that that are included in those sales. Once again, a lot of times when you look at the volume, it's pretty clear that that doesn't belong. Excuse me. Yeah, it is pretty clear that that doesn't have a situation where you're going to use it. It's just not. It's going to be used for something else. So, and the name of some of these businesses, they don't necessarily coincide with the type of product they sold. So there was always a question as, well, that doesn't look to be the type of business that they're in. We're going to look at the information internally. So, and I can tell you, from my own personal experience over the years, a lot of times when somebody opens up a permit, there may be a general permit at the time that they open it for some retail establishment, but as their business grows, all of a sudden they start expanding what they sell. And I don't think that was ever considered or taken into account when the auditor decided, well, I'm going to accept it or I'm going to disallow it. Again, they accepted some, but 67% is a pretty significant ratio. And again, when you incorporate the fact that we did, or the taxpayer did not include the claim of the sales, the exempt sales in the sales tax return, yeah, then you wind up with a error percentage that's, basically, what is it, almost twice the amount of what was reported as taxable. So that's not really a factor, and it shouldn't really be a factor. I mean, at the end of the day, $19 million in sales, 17 of it was disallowed, and, 2 was allowed. So if you look at it that way, that certainly doesn't seem like somebody that actually was trying to be unbiased in making decisions. And like I said, when you're talking about volume, we use the 30,000 just to be conservative and kind of gauge where the department was going with this.
Judge Stanley, you had some questions?
Yes, I have a couple initially for the department. I know that you've cast doubt on whether these certificates that were submitted, the 9 certificates, were taken contemporaneously, but even if they weren't, couldn't they be considered XYZ, akin to XYZ letters?
Yeah, that's right. Department offered that process to the appellant, and they declined it. They don't want to do it.
But what I'm asking is whether the department could consider what they're calling resale certificates as XYZ letters, in fact.
Yeah, so we could treat it that way, and if the customer claimed that they sold gardening supplies, we would look into the business to see if they actually sold those types of items. I know Judge Turner asked about the types of items that may have been sold by these businesses under the 30,000 threshold. So West Side was one of the resale customers that he claimed. There's a number of items, including gloves, scalpels, trellises, flanges, other things like that are usually the LED lights that are used to grow cannabis and used in the growing of cannabis operations. So we do look to the business. An XYZ letter does not relieve the taxpayer of the liability. We look into it to see if we can accept it, and in that regard, we would reject the XYZ letter in this case because they aren't in the business of selling gardening supplies.
Thanks, Mr. Parker.
And just to add to that, a lot of times in that XYZ letter process, the department reaches out to the customer and talks to them. And in this case, the department attempted to reach out and talk to these customers. And as Mr. Sharma noted, some didn't respond to the calls, and others indicated that they didn't remember signing or issuing a resale certificate. And so in those cases, where there are XYZ letters sent and follow-ups done, if the customer doesn't confirm that they resold the product, as Mr. Parker indicated, the department does additional research, but ultimately it's not, it's just a method, a tool that can be used to try to confirm whether the sale was a resale in fact, but doesn't necessarily automatically prove that it was.
Thank you, Mr. Bacchus. Mr. Parker, can you refer me to the page for the one that you just referenced that had lights and other things on it?
Sure, give me a second. I'll find it for you. I was looking at the Excel working papers.
Oh, okay. Well, there are only 9 pages. One of us should.
Oh, no, I'm looking at the Schedule 12A 1A, which is probably 600 or 700 pages of the file. So I'll find it real quick, though.
Can I just ask a quick question while you're looking for that? Just to jump in on what Judge Stanley said. When you were contacting those customers and you were able to successfully reach them, this might sound obvious, but did you ask them if they sold those kind of supplies just generally?
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry. I was concentrating on finding those line items from the schedules.
Sorry, I can wait until you're done, or I can.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
I'll wait.
If it's easier,
I
you
can-
can refer me to a different one in one of the 9
No, I'll
resellers.
give you a page number and a line item number for some of these transactions. So, page 736. This is the last page of the Schedule 12A-1A. And let's see. Line 26,737 talks about black lighting gloves. Going to page 735, line item 26,716 has LED Pro for $2,700. Line 26,713 has scalpels. 26,711 has pruning scissors. Trying to see if there's some others. But those are the types of items that obviously are generally used for a farmer, a growing operation, especially a cannabis type business. So that's what we would look to see. Are those types of items potentially resold?
Okay, thank you.
I'll just repeat my question then. So when you were contacting those customers on the retail certificates and you were able to get through to them, did you ask them whether they generally did sell that kind of equipment, gardening equipment, lights, things like that?
That's generally the procedure is. Okay, when we ask the customer, so basically the signatory says, in some cases they never responded, the one we talked to, they did not give any further information. They say we don't even remember issuing a resale certificate, or they say we never signed it. And again, we can ask the question, but based on the notes or based on the memo we got from field office, there was nothing confirmed by the customers.
Okay,
Thank
and
you.
I have a couple of questions for appellant. So appellant, did you say that you didn't collect any resale certificates, or they didn't know to?
No, they had resale certificates, but you
They
know, when
had
you're-
resale certificates.
Yeah, but when you're looking at the number of transactions and all the different customers, they clearly did not have them all. Some of
Sure.
them they were able to secure after the fact.
So the ones that the 11 that you submitted, those were received contemporaneously with the sale at the same time or around the same time?
Possibly received, possibly found.
Okay, and other than those 11, so those were all customers within the sample period? Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And appellant didn't just collect resale certificates for all its resale sales, just generally as a general practice?
Well, as a general practice, what they did was they got a permit number.
Okay, and so
Which- yeah.
so they didn't. Okay. So, and you talk about appellant doing a lot of volume,
Yep.
high number of sales, several millions of dollars through the liability period. Anytime did appellant think that they should check whether they're in compliance with the sales and use tax laws?
Well, since we don't really do any general bookkeeping and we don't really do anything for clients unless we have control of
Sure,
the
but
filing. in
do you
this
know
partic-
if? Sorry.
Yeah, so in
Sorry,
this
go ahead.
particular case, yeah, I didn't know what the day-to-day operations were about.
And did they do their own accounting, filing their own sales and use tax returns?
I believe that is the case. Still the case.
With millions of dollars in sales, right? Okay. So you didn't get any XYZ letters, is that correct?
Correct, because we try to do that, and at the end of the day, we were not getting them.
Mm-hmm.
So that didn't work, period.
So did you send any of those out to your customers?
We try to send a few out to see what kind of response we would get. And since most customers don't really know what it is, they were not in the mood to sign it and return it.
Okay. But why didn't you send them out to all your customers then?
The sample that we tried to incorporate did not work, so we thought it was a waste of time. And we
Okay.
felt that if we can find a resale certificate or get it and make sure that we can verify the permit was open, then we felt that was a better approach.
Okay. So did you ever reach out to these clients, I mean, these customers by phone, explain to them what this information it was that you were trying to get?
I did not, but the client did. And again, that's where I explained that when you have some third party calling you and asking you questions, a lot of times you're not going to answer that question because you don't know what it's going to get
Right.
yourself into. So,
But-
no, we wouldn't do it because we don't have the relationship.
But you're not just any third party, these are repeat customers, correct?
Correct, but we don't do any day-to-day operations for them. So we don't really know those customers to us.
But you do have an established relationship with them. You're their vendor, and I'm assuming they returned to you for a reason. So, but they didn't want to answer any of those questions.
No. You got me wrong there. I'm talking about the customer and my client having that conversation. Yeah, I don't know that they went ahead and called every single one of them. The auditor, I believe, was the one that called, but I have no idea who the auditor spoke with.
Okay.
A lot of times when they speak to just an employee, that's just, like I mentioned, it's a waste because
Okay.
the employee is not going to say anything and they're going to answer, in such a way as, well, no, we don't do that, or I don't recall, because that's the end of that conversation. They don't want to get in trouble for something they're not familiar with. But yeah, if my client called the customer, they got a resale certificate or they found it.
So you said that the sales for resale were in fact sales for resale. Do you have any evidence showing that they were in fact resold?
Well, the way Regulation 1668 explains it, when you're talking about a significant amount of transactions that clearly would not be considered a consumable.
I don't think the regulation, volume of sales really has anything to do with the character of whether it's sale for resale or not.
Well,
Can you point me to which section of the regulation says that?
well, it may be an annotation that addresses that, but for somebody who's been doing sales tax as long as I have, that has been the nature of the business. So when you can show that the volume is something that would not be something that you or I would purchase or consume, that in itself dictates whether it's probably a resale or not, or likely a resale.
Did appellant find any evidence, or did they look for any evidence that these customers that provided these resale certificates actually sold these types of items, such as a listing on their website, an advertisement, anything like that?
Well, if we try to get the department to accept the resale certificate or accept our argument that it was a sale for resale, that was directly based on information we got from our client. So they would have known that they were in the business of reselling those type of products. And again, under Regulation 1588, there are certain products that are considered exempt. So we use both to determine. I mean, our argument was not, okay, you need to accept this because clearly that's a resale, even though they're buying 2 or 3 of these items. No. And if obviously if it's somebody in farming that they're consuming it, our argument was not that they're reselling it.
So my question was, do you have any evidence of that other than just what your client has told you?
No.
Okay. I don't have any additional questions at this time.
One more.
Okay.
Has to do with the question of alleged exempt sales. Was unclear by the briefing the nature of the products that were sold as exempt and the denial of the exemption. Could you walk me through that real quick? If I recall, the argument was that there are certain products sold that are exempt under 1588, and if I recall, you had argued that the department's denial of those recognition of that exempt sale was for the lack of a resale certificate. Can you help me understand the nature of the products that were claimed to be exempt under that reg?
Yes, yeah, there's certain chemicals and certain products that are used in growing, whether it be cannabis or growing plants or what have you, that are considered to be exempt by nature under Regulation 1588.
Yeah.
So what we did was we try to identify as many of those products as we could on the transactions that were questioned, and then obviously come up with a number that we felt should be deleted from the taxable measure.
Department, can you help me out understand that, the denial for the exemption? I was unclear whether it was because of the lack of a resale certificate or the lack of qualification because of the type of the product.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that one. So it's not a resale certificate, but it would be an exemption certificate.
Got it.
And exemption certificates, much in the same way as a resale certificate, if timely taken in good faith, is something that the retailer can show the department to say, to basically prove that those sales were either not at retail or not taxable or exempt in this situation. So 1588 is specific to seeds, plants, and fertilizer. And when those products are sold to someone and the product that those seeds, plants, or fertilizer creates or grows, and if that product is sold for human consumption or is sold in that taxpayer's regular course of business, then those items are exempt, and it doesn't matter if there's an exemption certificate. It just has to be proven that that was the case. Whereas if a valid exemption certificate was taken, then no further proof needs to be made. It's just, here's the exemption certificate. It's a get out of tax free card, essentially, if it's taken properly. In this case, where there weren't exemption certificates, then it has to be proven that the customers purchased these items and that the product of them were either going to be sold for human consumption or sold in the regular course of that taxpayer's business, which was taken into account, as Mr. Sharma said in his presentation. Mostly the fertilizers that were sold to growers where they were growing cannabis, for example, and that cannabis was sold in that taxpayer's regular course of business, then the department allowed the sales of those fertilizers as exempt to those taxpayers, to those customers.
Thank you. Without any more questions, we'll let you have 5 minutes before you close.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Judge Turner. Yeah, so, and to the extent that, just a rebuttal to the department's position, yeah, a lot of those products are usually sold as something else. They turn into something else that's resold, and hence the exemption. But, yeah, I just think that the approach that was taken, and again, during COVID, when you have an audit that's being performed remotely, the questions are not being asked, it was a monumental amount of work where we had to go through, and I just felt that the department was not being reasonable, number one, to determine whether these transactions should be allowed as exempt or whether, in fact, the customers were really in business. And one other aspect of the transactions, and I think the department alluded to it, was when you have a situation where a business has closed or a permit has been closed, a lot of times what we've noticed when we've done our due diligence is that it's either it becomes incorporated or it winds up turning into a different type of corporate structure where they wind up getting a new permit. Now, a lot of times we could get that information, but sometimes we couldn't. and obviously we try to rely on the department to do it, but we're not there sitting with the auditor going through every single one of them. If we had access to the system, that's what we would do, and we try to do that to the extent that we can on the City TFA website. However, if we don't have a permit number, we can't punch in a name and come up with a permit number like I think Texas allows us to do. So it would be nice if that was an added feature where you can actually look at that. Because we will go through, we'll do Google search and we'll do whatever it takes to determine. And we use this because when the client provided us information, we wanted to check to make sure that that was a legitimate customer. And we wanted, we weren't going to make the argument that this is a legitimate resale customer if we didn't do our own due diligence to make sure that they were in business. And, if we found an address, then that was the position we took. But I just felt they took an aggressive position. They didn't really do anything, and at the end of the day, I don't know if they did it because the total exempt sales that were not included in the sales tax return, and they felt that that should be included, which again, by law, technically you don't have to, but I do notice the department is trying to make sure that all sales are included, because at the end of the day, sales for resale become an important factor in determining whether somebody should be audited or not. But again, the reasoning, I don't know. I didn't do their day-to-day sales tax returns, but that shouldn't be a factor in determining whether something is for resale or not. And like I said, I hadn't really heard anybody state that if you have significant volume, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a sale for resale. But, based on my experience, for the most part, it's usually a sale for resale. Whether the customer is registered, properly registered, that's another story. So, but that's it. That's our position. And again, we feel strongly that there should be an adjustment made. How we go about doing that, there's a lot of transactions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for presenting. Thank you for the department for presenting as well. I think that concludes our hearing. I think we're prepared to close the record this time, so let's close the record. And with that, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. We'll take it under submission. We will have a discussion, and we'll issue our opinion within the next 100 days. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh,